Hello, third year students. In all my last lectures, I had been speaking and explaining to you about the poets and poems of the Romantic Age. I started with William Wordsworth, and the last poem I discussed with you was Two Autumn by John Keats. Today, I'll be talking about another poet named Alfred Lord Tennyson, who belonged to a different age, a different era, known as the Victorian Age. Tennyson's poem Ulysses is prescribed in your syllabus, but before I actually go into the text, let me tell you in brief about Tennyson and also about his poem Ulysses. First, let me tell you about the poet. So, Alfred Lord Tennyson, who was born in 1809 and lived up to 1892, was one of the major poets, or one can say a representative of the Victorian age. Victorian age in English literature refers to the time when Queen Victoria ruled England from 1837 to 1901. In 1827, Tennyson attended Trinity College at Cambridge, where he happened to meet Arthur Henry Hallam, and later they went on to become very close friends. And in the same year, Tennyson published his first collection of poems in collaboration with his elder brother Charles, and it was entitled Poems by Two Brothers. This collection of poems didn't really do well. He published his first solo collection of poems entitled Poems Chiefly Lyrical in the year 1830. This collection of poems included his much celebrated poems such as Claribel and Mariana, and this was the publication that helped him a lot in establishing his career as a poet and also made him popular. He brought out his third publication in 1842, a collection of poems which set him apart as one of the greatest poets of the Victorian era. This collection had popular poems such as Locksley Hall, Break, 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 a new version of his old poem, The Lady of Shalott, and Ulysses, of course, which we will be studying in the upcoming classes. Apart from these above mentioned poems, Tennyson is best remembered for his masterpiece In Memoriam, published in 1850. This is a long poem dedicated to his dear friend Arthur Hallam, whose sudden death was a major loss for Tennyson, and the charge of the Light Brigade in 1854. Tennyson was appointed Poet Laureate in 1850 after the death of William Wordsworth, and he held the position until his death in 1892. And when we analyze Tennyson's poetry, we come across some features such as he had a great interest in medieval legends and heroic narratives. There is a melancholic tone, natural description with visual imagery, mastery over rhythm, especially in his short lyrics, social and political concerns of the age, and subjects related to science and religion. And altogether, he could be considered as a typical Victorian, which makes it all the more right to call him a true representative of his age and also one of the most frequently quoted writer. Here are some often quoted lines of his poetry. "'Tis better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. Nature red in tooth and claw, knowledge comes but wisdom lingers. To strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield." And this last one is from Ulysses, which we will be studying in the next classes. Now, let me tell you in brief what the poem Ulysses is all about. Ulysses was written in 1833 and it got published in 1842 in Tennyson's second volume of poetry. The poem is written in blank verse, that means it has no rhyme scheme, and the poem is also an example of dramatic monologue. Now, what is a dramatic monologue? Dramatic monologue is a type of a poem written in the form of a speech of a character. It is similar to a soliloquy, but the difference lies in the fact that a soliloquy is spoken when the speaker is alone and no one is listening. No one is listening to him. But in a monologue, the speaker is speaking to a silent listener. Here, in this poem Ulysses, Ulysses is the sole speaker who is standing before the royal palace of Ithaca and speaks before the fellow mariners about his life and personality. Tennyson wrote this poem after the death of his dear friend Arthur Hallam, and it expresses his feeling about the need of going forward and facing the struggle of life. In fact, Tennyson, speaking about this poem, once said, I quote, "There is more about myself in Ulysses, which was written under the sense of loss that all had gone by, but that still life must be fought out to the end. It was more written with the feeling of this loss upon me than many poems in memoriam." Unquote. And if we look at the historical background of this character Ulysses, it turns out that it is the Roman name for the Greek name Odysseus, who is a mythical figure of Homer's epic poems Iliad and Odyssey, who spent 10 years of his life fighting in the Trojan War. And in Tennyson's poem, Ulysses is a figure who represents thirst for knowledge and adventure. The poem describes Ulysses coming back to his kingdom Ithaca after 20 years of war and adventure. First 10 years spent at the war, and another 10 long years spent in wandering while journeying back to his homeland. And in the poem, Ulysses is seen expressing his dissatisfaction and restlessness upon returning to his kingdom after his long voyage. Ulysses contrasts his present domestic life with his heroic past and contemplates his old age and eventual death. So, this was a brief information about Tennyson and his poem Ulysses. I'll be taking up the poem in detail in the coming classes. Thank you for today.